Yeah, absolutely. I came because I love listening and learning from others people who may have questions that I have not thought of. So I don't have, being the only one here, I don't have a question for you.
Well, that's okay. I'm glad that you're here. And, if you do want to talk about performance measures, that I love to do that. So, I'm more than happy to do that. We did have very low registration for this, I think, because the recording is online.
Sure.
And so folks have access to other things, but I think we're having a few folks trickle in. So yeah, so stick around. We'll see if other folks have questions. And if anything comes to mind, Robin, feel free
Thanks,
to ask it, because that's what we're here for.
Awesome.
Can we unmute Stephanie's line as well? Looks like Stephanie, you are unmuted. So feel free to unmute yourself and say hi.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Stephanie. Where are you joining us from?
Nelson County in Virginia.
All right. Excellent. Not too far away from where we are right now. And looks like Lou is here also. So if we can do the same to give Lou a chance to unmute herself if she like. Hi, Lou.
Hi.
How you doing?
Doing okay.
Good. We have a small but mighty crew here right now. There are three of you here joining us for the Q&A. So this is going to be super duper informal because it is such a small group and because there is recorded training online. So really we can just have a conversation about whatever you would like to talk about related to performance measurement. I'm going to throw into the chat some links, which I think that you probably have all found because you're here. So that there's the notice of funding opportunity is online, the performance measure instructions, of course, are online, and then there's the recorded training, which was the precursor to this Q&A. So hopefully you've had a chance to either watch the recording this year, or maybe you've watched it in a previous year. It is the same as the recording that we used last year. So those are the basis for today's conversation. But beyond that, if there's anything you'd like to know or ask or talk about with performance measures, the floor is yours and you're all unmuted. So feel free to unmute yourself and jump in if there's anything you'd like to ask.
I have a question. I can jump in. One of the things I was realizing as we were doing our TTA for programs or for potential applicants was just not really being sure what to tell them to put in certain fields in e-grants for the performance measures, like what should the described instrument include. And it seems like maybe once they get into e-grants and they're completing the module, that's when it tells them what they need to put in there. But I wasn't seeing anything that would help them kind of prepare beforehand. And I can't see that on my end. So just as I'm instructing applicants, I wasn't sure like what needs to be included there, because historically we've told them it should describe the instrument and the change that you expect to see and like what counts as improvement, but maybe they don't need to include that detail. So I just wanted some clarification on what detail they need to put in there.
Yeah, thanks for raising that, Lou. And actually, Public Health AmeriCorps has been useful for all of us, I think, here in AmeriCorps, because there are some things that we've been putting together as resources for that competition, because it's a brand new competition type where I'm like, oh, we should do this for the state and national main competition too. And one of those things is actually the performance measure training that, as I mentioned, the training that's online right now, the link that I put in the chat is for a training that we recorded last year. But this year for Public Health AmeriCorps, because we have so many new applicants to that competition, we put together a somewhat more extended performance measure training that actually walks through the screens in the performance measures module and shows what to put in each one. So Lou, even though that's specific to Public Health AmeriCorps, if the content of that performance measure training is helpful to you, feel free to A, use it, and B, I think that I'm already inspired to do something similar next year for the performance measure training for the main AmeriCorps state and national competition. So we're interested in your feedback if you think that that's helpful and if that answers the questions that you and some of your sub-applicants have about what to do with those fields.
Okay, thank you. I was on that webinar and I took a screenshot of that.
Cool.
part.
Okay. Well, since you were on the webinar, does that address the question? Do you think that that is what we could do for the main AmeriCorps state and national competition that would be more helpful to applicants, or is there more even than that that you had in mind that we really need to provide more guidance about?
I think that did it. I seem to recall the performance measures checklist used to also have, it used to be a little longer, and I do like that it's more streamlined, it seems like it used to include a little more like, did you describe this in the outcome measure? Did you describe, a few other different things? Because I still think it, like, again, this is asking for a little more work for them, but I think it's helpful to see, like, what is the change that they're expecting to see from pre to post if they're doing a pre to post, and why is that change meaningful in any way? Like, yeah. But it doesn't seem like AmeriCorps expects to see that information.
Yeah, I think that we, if you think about the application as a whole, we definitely want to see why the change being proposed is meaningful. And in fact, the selection criteria do include an assessment of whether the outcomes will be meaningful. Whether or not it needs to be in a particular field in the performance measures module, I think we've moved away from being quite so prescriptive about that, for better or for worse. When we changed the performance measures in 2019, we did open them up a little bit more, left them a little bit more formatting wise and content wise more to the discretion of the individual program to define it as they saw fit. And I think that the less prescriptiveness about what needed to be in each field went along with that. But that being said, in the application as a whole, it certainly is important for the applicant to make the case that the change they will be measuring and what they hope to see as a result of their program activities is meaningful. And the performance measures module is a good place to put that. So I believe that in the example that we walked through, again, for the Public Health AmeriCorps training, we did give an example of what the change would be and why it was meaningful. I think that same thing does exist in the recorded training that went along with this Q&A, but we didn't show where to put it in the performance measures module. And that's the piece that I think we could strengthen in next year's version of the recorded training.
Gotcha. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
No, thanks for the question. I'm glad you had a question. So let me just check with our LSI hosts. CGI new, is that a new participant in our Q&A here, or is that one of your logistical pieces?
I think that might be a new participant.
Awesome. Can we unmute that individual as well?
Yes.
Hi there. I just see the name CGI new, but if you're here for the Q&A, welcome. And can you let us know who you are and where you're calling from?
Yes, I don't know why I'm coming up as CGI new, so apologies for that. My name is Ashley Johnson. I'm with First, so I'm based in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thanks.
So we are, as you think you gathered, we're being very informal here. We're a small group and a mighty group, and we're happy to just talk about whatever. Oh, now it says Ashley. That's super helpful. Happy to talk about whatever questions you might have related to performance measures. Looks like we have Lindsey joining us as well. So if we can also unmute Lindsey, that would be great. Lindsey, welcome. And where are you joining us from?
If I'm still unmuted, this is Ashley. Lindsey is probably my colleague from First.
Oh, great. Okay, we have two First folks here. That's wonderful. Well, Ashley with Lindsey, welcome to both of you. Again, we're being very informal in terms of just having conversations around any questions that folks have about performance measurement. I'm going to put in the chat again a couple of links that I put in earlier. Probably you have seen these because you're here, but this is a link to the Notice of Funding Opportunity webpage, the specific performance measure instructions document that's on that webpage, and then the recorded training on best practices in performance measure design, which is also on that same page, and which is the pre-reading or Yeah, what passes for the pre-reading for this Q&A. So if you've had a chance to look at those, great. If you haven't, that's okay too. Really happy to answer any questions that you have about performance measures for AmeriCorps state and national applications. So are there any questions that you had in mind that you wanted to ask?
I'm not sure that we had developed specific ones. We actually haven't had the opportunity to be on a Q&A yet. The only other training we went to didn't really have that component. It was like come up and come to the chat and like you could, say some things there, but it wasn't an opportunity to get into it. And then also, I think the last time I looked, there wasn't a Zoom link still. So I wasn't 100% sure this was the right time and place to be. So that's why we were a little late, but glad to see there was a Zoom link there. I think the last time I looked was maybe sometime last week and I still hadn't seen that. But we are developing for a focus area specific to education performance measures. We currently operate an AmeriCorps Vista program. So we're somewhat familiar with how these things work. But looking at the document that you sent in terms of the performance measures instruction sheet, the PDF there, we've gone through the NOFA. We've looked at that, didn't have any main questions with that. I think I'm just looking here to see if there's anything on this document that you sent that I would want clarification on.
Sarah, while Ashley's looking, I'll just applaud and maybe reinforce your excitement around potentially doing some calls similar to the public health core, especially around the module. I've been on both. I think that they've been wonderful. I also think there's a real energy and momentum around public health core that I don't know that I've seen, or maybe just because I've been around so long and something's new, it looks shiny and fun. But everything that's going on with that, if you register, you get, the follow-up email, you get a periodic announcement on, don't forget about us, here's the due date. There's just a lot of positive reinforcement going on. And so if that could be something that ASN was interested in doing for some of these larger, broader NOFOs, I just, again, want to ditto and applaud that.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. And I'll pass that along for sure. We're using a new model involving, as you know, we have the Office of Regional Operations. This is a somewhat new model for AmeriCorps as the agency. It's only a year or two old. And so the model of outreach that we're using for Public Health AmeriCorps is new for us. And it's a new type of partnership with the Office of Regional Operations. And it certainly has been exciting from our end as well. It's been a fun collaboration. So I completely agree with you. I think this is a model that we can build on and grow, not just for Public Health AmeriCorps, but for other competitions too. So I appreciate that feedback and I'll pass it along. Ashley, don't want to put you on the spot in any way. Did you find any question that you wanted to ask? If not, that's fine too.
No, not so much from this. I always find that at least in my experience with other calls of this type, I learn more from the questions other people ask. So that's kind of what I was hoping to come in here. But I feel like the PDF, which was a document that I don't think I've looked at, this 2020 version of the performance measure instructions, it's pretty clear. And we have an idea of which specific outcomes and data collection measures we would be looking at. So I don't think I have anything specific to that. I haven't gone into the system though to see how they're put into the actual application. And on a prior call that I was in, one of the few questions was around trying to articulate how to best do that within the structure of the application and how that was challenging. I haven't gone in to actually see what that experience is yet, but that was what the feedback that I had heard, just trying to figure out how to answer the question within the context of the application. So not a specific question, more like a comment that I'm wondering about later. And I guess I could have done that prior to this, so apologies.
No worries, not a problem at all. I think our more experienced colleagues on the phone here will probably tell you that eGrants is a thing of beauty and a joy forever. So you will encounter challenges along the way of figuring out how to work the system. But we definitely are here to support you. So if there are things that are not clear in our system, then there's an email address which I know is advertised in all of these sessions. It's AmeriCorps@cns.gov, and I'll type that in the chat too. Actually, Sarah Foster, since you're online, do you want to type that email address in the chat quick? because I can't talk and type very well at the same time. So that you have that. So if there are anything about the application itself that doesn't make sense, challenges you run into as you start to enter things in the system, that's an email address that you can always reach out to with any questions, application or grant related.
And do you know generally what the response time on that might be?
I will say that we try to answer things as fast as possible. We are a small and mighty team, so sometimes it's not immediate, but we'll do the very best we can to get back to you quickly.
Sure, no problem. I just didn't know who was covering that, because we did have some other questions that we were directed to that email. We haven't sent them yet, but we're just kind of wondering on turnaround time for that. So that's helpful to know.
Turnaround time could be a little longer if it's a question that we might not have a ready-made answer for yet. If it needs some research, it might take a little longer, but we'll try to get you a response back as fast as we can.
Sure. And then are you guys going to offer, I'm looking through the list right here. I don't see any other offerings Q&A for this specific developing performance measure. So is this the only opportunity for Q&A besides following up with the email?
Yes, this is the only Q&A on performance measures. There is a not related, but thematically similar Q&A coming up in November on best practices in demonstrating evidence. I say that it's similar because performance measure data is often used by programs as one means among many to demonstrate evidence. So there's also a pre-recorded webinar on that. There's also a Q&A scheduled for that. And I take it back, it's not actually November, it is October. October 28th from 1 to 2 p.m. So, so that's another opportunity to ask questions about how to demonstrate the impact of your program. Again, performance measurement being one of many ways to show evidence that a program will be effective.
Oh, great. And it looks like most of them now that had dates and times now have Zoom registration, but some still say coming soon. Is there any timeline on, the best practices in budget development and some of the other ones that don't have those details yet?
I will check in on that. I didn't realize until right now that one still said coming soon. The budget development webinar is led by the Office of Grant Operations. The Office of Grant Operations here. So it could be that it's a matter of coordination of schedule with them, but I'll check into that and we'll try to get that changed to an official Zoom registration soon.
Sounds good. Appreciated. And I would say, just from the outside looking in, that I would echo the feedback that was given while I was looking at the PDF. One thing that's been sort of challenging for us as we move into looking at AmeriCorps is just that in this broad AmeriCorps state and national application, we've had to come back to the website to remind ourselves when the webinar is, or when the Q&A is, or when the NOFA is opening, instead of actually receiving like those reminders and emails. But we've gotten all the emails and reminders about the new public health opportunities.
Gotcha.
So it's just really, it's great that that's being so promoted, but would be awesome to have that also on these other opportunities, because it's been a bit of a challenge for me just to go back to the website and see, oh, does this have a Zoom link now? Is this scheduled now? So just anything that could be helpful with that would be great.
I appreciate that feedback. Thanks. And as I mentioned to Robin, I'll definitely take that back. That's very useful feedback for us. Thank you.
Sure. Well, we don't want to take all the time. We were happy to listen to others' wise questions, but really didn't prepare any ourselves. We do plan to be on the other webinar on the 28th around demonstrating evidence, and we're going to bring some of our evaluation and staff to that meeting with us. So hopefully, anything we might have missed and not bring in question today, we can also get there. But I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. Sorry I wasn't more prepared.
No, that's okay. Glad to have you. It does look like we have another participant, Jamie. So if we're able to unmute Jamie's line. Excellent. Jamie, feel free to unmute and say hi.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm actually with Ashley and Lindsay as part of the first program. So just here to listen and, be able to absorb some of the questions that are being asked and learn what we can.
Wow, we have mighty representation from the first program. That's great. Welcome to all of you. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, we are totally determined and, very passionate about AmeriCorps and the partnership that we have with you all. So definitely excited to be here.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you. We also have mighty representation from Washington State with Lou and Robin here. And we also have Stephanie from Virginia. Stephanie, did you have any questions that you particularly wanted to ask, or are you kind of in listening mode as well?
I'm kind of in listening mode. This is to tell you a little bit about who I am. I work at a FQHC in rural Nelson County, and we are just for the first time kind of looking at AmeriCorps and seeing how we could use that to help with our outreach for COVID and, just getting more awareness about importance of healthcare. And so as this is my first foray into kind of seeing how this program works, I'm just trying to look in and learn as much as I possibly can.
That's great. Well, glad to have you. Glad to have you interested in AmeriCorps and exploring that as a new option for you. We love that. So trying to think what we could share that would be helpful to you at this point. Stephanie, did you have a chance to look at the pre-recorded webinar related to performance measurement, or is that still on your list of things to do?
I haven't gotten to that one. I did look at the PDF of like outcomes and things like that. And I think that answered some of my questions. Initially, I was wondering if our evaluation was going to be over, the program itself of how we're showing that, we're engaging the AmeriCorps volunteers that we're working with, or if it was the impact on the community. I just wasn't sure exactly what needed to be evaluated and tracked, because we have so many different mechanisms for like patients, patient outcomes and that sort of stuff, but we don't have as good of measures in place for community engagement. So I was just taking an extra careful look at that piece.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point, and something general that we could say about performance measurement for AmeriCorps State and National. Well, two things. One is that performance measurement is intended to help you tell your story. So the story of the impact that you hope to be making, the story of who you're reaching, the story of the difference you're making, that's the goal of performance measurement fundamentally. And so we have this set of national performance measures. Our hope and belief is that those are helpful for folks in telling their story. They form these overarching buckets, I would say, that a lot of different kinds of service and different kinds of outcomes fit into those categories. And so a lot of programs find that structure helpful to be able to define how they could express their impact. We also have what we call applicant determined performance measures. So if what you're doing is not captured in any of the standard performance measures, you can also create your own performance measures that better tell your story. And there are some parameters about how to do that, how not to do that. There's a performance measures checklist in the instructions document that might help you avoid some potential pitfalls of choosing performance measures and structuring performance measures. But that's the overall goal. And so I'm glad you're thinking about what you're doing, what matters to you, and how best to measure that performance. I guess the other thing I would say is that the AmeriCorps State and National performance measures are designed to capture the impact of what AmeriCorps members do. So the impact on the community, on community beneficiaries, on the organizations that they serve, sometimes the environment that they serve, but the impact of those activities in the community. We also care deeply about the impact of AmeriCorps service on AmeriCorps members. That's really important to us. But there aren't performance measures for that. And sometimes that gets communicated, that unintentionally communicates we don't care about that. That is really not the intention of having performance measures focused on community impact. It's actually that because all of our programs have AmeriCorps members, and we hope that all of those AmeriCorps members are having an impactful service experience and are being changed themselves as a result of their service, we use a different mechanism to collect information about AmeriCorps member impact. We use the member exit survey, which is a survey that's sent to all completing AmeriCorps members so they can talk about the impact that their service had on them. And we also use this set of what we call performance data elements. These are data points that we ask for information on in progress reports. And they appear on everybody's progress reports, so all grantees are asked to report on those. So even though there aren't performance measures that you choose related to the impact of the program on members, that is something we care about and is something that we ask you to keep track of, and also ask the AmeriCorps members themselves to tell us about after they serve.
Okay, that's really great information. Thank you for that.
Sure. Well, I know one of our attendees had to drop off, which is fine. Anything else from any of the folks on the line right now? Anything that you'd either like to talk about or ask about related to performance measurement, or more generally, what's involved in measuring performance under an AmeriCorps program?
Well, so this is actually, it did occur to me to maybe ask, since you were talking about creating your own performance measures and the checklist around that, can you give any examples of folks that have created their own performance measure that you thought was, a good utilization of that, creating your own?
Yeah, the example that comes to mind is that we have some legal assistance programs. So programs that help individuals who don't have easy access to the legal system, help them with representation, help them navigate the court system, help them potentially resolve a case that may be open. Those are things that we don't have standard performance measures about. I don't really know why we don't have standard performance measures on those, because it is something that we have a handful of programs that do, but for whatever reason, we don't have national performance measures on that. So that's a case where a program would choose to create their own measure. Sometimes the measures involve increased knowledge about the legal system and how to navigate it. Sometimes the performance measure might involve being able to resolve their cases, not necessarily win their cases, but at least bring it to resolution. And there are other ways that people come about that as well. But that would be one example that comes to mind of where the national performance measures might not be the right fit, and making a unique measure might be a better option.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. I do have another question, and I apologize if it's something that is obvious that's already answered somewhere else. But one of the challenges that we've experienced with our VISTA program, which is a national operational grant, is that we try to ask all of our members about their impact and have a collective, analysis of that impact across our entire program, with the understanding, though, that some of them are going to focus on certain performance measures more so than others. When it comes to AmeriCorps, we're anticipating that there might be less diversity in terms of the outcomes that we're measuring, but there could still be different ways that they're getting to their objective in terms of exposing students to STEM and increased interest in STEM and STEM literacy and 21st century skills and things around that. So I'm just wondering if, in your impression in terms of looking at other programs, is it good to have that aggregate roll up when you have multiple sites and you're trying to talk about the impact of the program at large? Or is it equally good to have sort of these different snapshots of impact by site and geography?
That's a great question. And by the way, you're speaking my language, because I'm a former chemistry teacher. So when you talk about STEM literacy, I'm all there. So thank you for the service that you do in that area.
Sure.
There's a place for both. I think in performance measurement, we tend to want to talk about collective accomplishments, which means that if you have multiple sites in multiple areas that are doing things along the same line with the same general goals in mind, let's just take STEM literacy as one general goal, even if they're going about it in a slightly different way, even if they're using a slightly different instrument, depending on what school district or what state they may be operating in, or what the sort of the parameters of the program design in that particular area, being able to report that collectively with other accomplishments in the same vein has a power to it. Because it allows you to talk about that overarching accomplishment of the program at large. And this is one of the reasons why our performance measures, the national performance measures that we have, are designed to be big tents. They're designed to be buckets in which you can fit different kinds of approaches, different kinds of interventions or program activities, if they try to accomplish a common goal. So in the area of education, for example, we have increased academic achievement, which is a very, very big bucket and means a lot of very different things, depending on the grade level, depending on the subject matter. But you can still tell the collective story of increased achievement, even though there are those differences from site to site and program to program. So that's really what we've tried to do with the performance measures, but you don't want to lose the individual richness of what individual sites and members and approaches do and are. So that's where, for example, in a progress report, we might ask you to tell those stories in narrative form. To give us some anecdotes, some great stories about what your AmeriCorps members are accomplishing, what's happening in those sites that may not fit, that the detail may be lost in a performance measure, but that detail could be captured in that narrative way. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And it sounds very similar to how we navigate that in our experiences with our Vista National program. But I find that I don't know what I don't know in terms of AmeriCorps. So I didn't know.
Fair enough.
Nuance there, so that's helpful. Thank you.
And I think that you'll find too. So Vista uses some of the same performance measures that AmeriCorps State and National does. You'll recognize the names and identities of some of the performance measures, but we do use them in a different way. And Vista does tend to go more at the individual site and the individual member with respect to defining performance measures, whereas with AmeriCorps State and National, we tend to go higher level at the program level and roll things up. So you will see that difference. The other difference, of course, being that with Vista, you're primarily reporting on capacity building performance measures. With State and National, you can report on capacity building performance measures. We do have programs that operate in a capacity building mode, but we also have direct service programs that are reporting on outputs and outcomes from that direct service. So that will be a difference as well compared to what you've done with Vista.
Right. Thank you.
Anything
Sarah,
else? Yeah.
I have a kind of nuanced question, and I'm assuming there's not a perfect answer, so I'm really just looking for like thought partnership. Washington has long been a big fan of the multi-focused intermediary approach, mostly funded out of our formula dollars. We do have a large statewide service corps that's funded competitively, and they are able, because of size, to do a lot of performance measures that are very focused on direct service. But with some of our smaller multi-focused intermediaries that are really acting on behalf of a small community as a legal entity that has the capacity, to run and operate a grant and then sub out those member positions to meet whatever the changing need in that community is year to year, it gets a little gray on how to best coach them if they truly are more of a capacity building organization in reference to like the site versus trying to find some type of direct service measure that can, potentially hold, half of their MSYs, not necessarily all, but, like a majority or something like that, whether they're doing social emotional work with youth and families or environmental work or whatever it may be. Do you see this with other states, and do you have any thoughts on applicants that are using more of a capacity building at the site level for their kind of theory of change and performance measure?
Yes. Oh, multi-focused intermediaries. Yeah, that is always a challenging question with respect to performance measures. And for folks on the line that aren't familiar, the multi-focused intermediary is the term that we use for a program that acts as an umbrella organization and then provides AmeriCorps member positions and support to smaller organizations in their state or area to accomplish what could be a large variety of things, which is why it's called multi-focus intermediary, because they may be providing some members to organization A to help with some health-related service, and then to a different organization for education and another one for environment. And so they really are doing a lot of different things in different places. And depending on who they select to partner with in a particular year, they may be doing a different mix of things from year to year. So it is definitely a challenging thing to try to build performance measures for. So I guess I would say two things, Robin. Neither one of them is a perfect answer, and neither one of them might work in any given context, but this is what I've seen done in other for other cases that are similar. One is to look at that umbrella capacity building. Not every intermediary does capacity building, as you said, so this is not a good fit in all cases. But if it is true that the service of the members, no matter what context it's in, what focus area they're operating in, that it is increasing efficiency, effectiveness, and or program reach for the organizations with which they are serving, then that makes a really helpful umbrella, something that can tie these different sites with their different goals and different service activities together in that lens, again, of effectiveness, efficiency, or program reach. So that works if it works. But if it really is the case that the multi-focus intermediary is not in the mode of building the capacity of the host organizations, they really just are providing service members to provide direct service, but not really looking at the organizational growth and development explicitly, then it's a matter of trying to figure out something that has enough critical mass that it could realistically be called a primary service activity. So especially for the newer folks on the line, something important to know about AmeriCorps state and national performance measures is that grant applicants are not required to capture everything they do in performance measures. What is required is that there is at least one performance measure. We call it an aligned performance measure, which means an output paired with an outcome that's connected to the primary service activity as the program defines it. And so it doesn't have to be the activity that all or even a majority of the AmeriCorps members are doing. It just has to be primary, primary in a way that makes sense to that grant applicant, that program. So it could be that in the case of a multi-focus intermediary that does 12 different things, their primary service activity as they define it may be just a small portion of the member service years, the members that they've enrolled are contributing to that particular performance measure. It's not ideal, but it also is often the reality in a multi-focus intermediary world. And so that's also an approach that a program like that could take.
That's really helpful, Sarah, because I think it gives us reassurance and the flexibility to approach it from what is your mission, vision, and theory of change, instead of oftentimes, I think this is just kind of natural in a grant making world, but people are looking to fit into like our boxes instead of like really leading with what their program designed. So that's it's just really validating. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And this is why in the recorded training, one of the first best practices that we talk about is to start with meaning the applicant, start with the applicant's vision of who they are and what they want to accomplish, and then pick performance measures that fit that, not the other way around. Don't try to artificially fit yourself into a performance measure just because you want to use that measure. That does not end well for anybody. So definitely want people to lead with their vision, lead with their theory of change, and use performance measures in a supportive role to tell the story of that theory of change, understanding that we do require performance measures. So it's not like we're leaving this completely free. They do have to have a performance measure, but it should be in service to the program's vision.
I might follow that up, since as long as there's still a small group, I can't see the participants. Is it okay if I ask another question, Sarah?
Yeah, we got 5 people here, and I think anybody who wants to jump in, please feel free to do that at any time. But I think a lot of folks are here to listen to the conversation. So Robin, go right ahead.
Okay, I wasn't planning on asking these, but since I have you, I really enjoy the fluidness of a live conversation instead of an email. I think for folks that have been around and have seen the performance measures, change over the years, the new expansion of the elements that are on a fiscal year instead of a program year, they do sometimes align with the output of a performance measure. And some folks have asked if they need to be switching or moving their performance measurements around or something like that in light of the recent elements. And our guidance to date has been, no, there's different time periods. They are considered different. And even though we stress heavily on unduplicated, that in this case, it is kind of 2 avenues to report information. Is that a fair assessment? Do you have any comments on the difference between performance measurements and data elements?
Yes, so to start with your first question, yes, that is a fair assessment. We do want people to report in both the performance measures and the performance data elements effectively the same information if in fact their performance measure is similar to that element. We don't want them to report it only on the performance measure or only on the performance element and not both. So so you're right that the principle of non-duplication does not apply to across those different kinds of data reporting. Beyond that, I can't remember, Robin, what your second question was. I got so excited about the first one.
I actually think you answered it. It was probably just me mumbling and asking the same thing in multiple ways. So you answered it for me.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, for the first folks on the phone, you would have done, as VISTA programs, you would have done a progress report supplement probably, where you were asked to report on a certain set of data points each year, and that was different from and submitted separately from your progress reports. In the AmeriCorps state and national world, it's all one report. There's one report with multiple tabs, and one of the tabs will look very similar to the progress report supplement that you may have completed for VISTA, where it asks for data on a certain predefined set of elements, and included among those are some elements focused on AmeriCorps member outcomes. And then in the performance measures section of the report, you would be reporting specifically on the outputs and outcomes that you chose in your grant application, and it would be based on what happened during that program year. So the purpose of having those two separate avenues of reporting is first of all, because one is better suited for some data and the other is better suited for others. But it's also an attempt to be a little bit more parallel between the way that AmeriCorps Vista and AmeriCorps seniors report information versus how AmeriCorps State and National typically did, and trying to create some parity there without trying to make a new report. Because Robin, I'm guessing you wouldn't necessarily love another progress report to fill out. So we are trying to keep it as one report, but have those different venues of reporting information.
Yeah, it's working well for us. Thanks for always considering those extra, those steps. I know it's all, even as a commission, we're always balancing value and burden on all those kinds of things.
For sure. It's the endless conversation, definitely. So appreciate your partnership in that. Well, we're at 3:45-ish. It looks like we've lost a couple folks, which is fine. Any other questions from anyone who is left on the line? Other things that may have come to mind as we've been talking here? This is not your last bite at the apple, because you can email AmeriCorps grants at cns.gov, and we're happy to answer questions that way as well. But anything else you'd like to talk about right now?
No, this is Ashley. I know some of my counterparts with FIRST had other meetings, and so they had to leave, and that's fine. This was helpful. This was very informative. After we go to the other session later in October, and we've reviewed some more of the documents, we'll certainly follow up by email, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk live to folks and learn from the other questions that were asked. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. Glad to have you. And Robin, thanks for the comment in the chat. No, we're not going to cancel the Q&As because we had a small group here. Don't worry. I think it's more of a rallying cry to us of like, hey, we need to get the word out about these Q&As. So we will try to do that. Certainly for our commission partners in Washington and elsewhere, we'd love your help. And I know that you have been providing help in your states in getting the word out about this competition and about the Q&As. So thanks for that, and hope to continue to partner with you on that. And we'll just, keep talking about these topics, and hope we have folks that are able and willing to engage.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, well, we'll wrap up for today. Thanks so much to all of you, and talk to you again another time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.